happening, everyone? Welcome back to another Adventure Box podcast given to you by Historical Conquest. Okay, so we've got a lot to go into. We're going to go into Zoroastrianism. That is the religion of the Persians. We're going into the arts, the culture, things like that. And then we're also going to, like promised, we're going to go into the Battle of Thermopylae. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about all these different things that have to do with this wide range of information. So first, let's go back to Darius. Darius the First ruled from 522 to 486 BC. That's when he mysteriously just died. He shaped the Persian Empire through not just his military expansion, but also religion, art, administration, and diplomacy. His dream of conquering Greece were left unfinished at the point when he died. So his son, Xerxes I, took up the challenge afterwards, leading to the legendary Battle of Thermopylae in 480. So it takes about 60 years between when he died and when that battle comes. Now, before we get there, let's go back into the legacy of Darius. Now, we know from the last time he died just before being able to go into Athens the second time. The first time, he lost like 6,000 people, and only 192 of the Athenians died. I don't know how the heck that happened. Even in modern day warfare, the most advanced armies still, okay, maybe they were very much advanced, and maybe that was. The Greeks were way more advanced than the Persians. So, yeah, we'll get into all that. So today we're going to be talking, again, Zoroastrianism and its influence on the empire. That's the religion of Persia. Persian art, architecture, all the different innovations of Darius and that era. We have the Persians' interaction with other civilizations. Now, we talked about the military part last time. We talked about the rebellions that happened in Egypt, or the rebellions that were happening in India. But now we're going to be talking about the trade and diplomacy. And then we're going to go into Xerxes I and the Battle of Thermopylae. So let's step back about 2,500 years ago. Again, it's about 486 BC. Darius has just died. But we're going to go into a little bit more of what he was able to establish. So first, on one of the most defining aspects of Persia, the civilization under Darius, was Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is one of the oldest, it's the world's oldest monotheistic religions. That's right. So they believed in one God. Through it predates Darius. He basically just saw the growth of it. He helped it become a state religion of the empire. So let's go back to when it was actually developed. This was, again, we're talking about Darius dying 486 BC. Zoroastrianism started with a man by the name of Zoroaster. So Zoroastrianism was founded by, now his full name was Zarathustra. His normal name, or easier name, is Zoroaster. So he was a prophet who lived sometime in the time between 1500 to 1000 BC in ancient Persia. He introduced the idea of a single god. Now, this god was called Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda, who represented truth, light, and order. Now, my printer has a really hard time not speaking up. It wants to talk to you. I'm about to crush it because every time I do the podcast, it wants to say something or wants to go through a cleaning cycle. There we go. Anyways, Zoroaster's teachings were radical at their time because Persia and all the different tribes were all polytheistic. They believed in different gods depending on different circumstances. But he taught for one God. So it's an interesting thing. Every time it seems like there was polytheism, there became like one person that was led to teach about a single God, monotheistic God. Let's take some of the examples. Way back, there was Abraham. Abraham, father of Israel and the Jews, the Hebrews. He taught that there was one God. His father worshipped multiple gods. He actually made statues for multiple gods. We talked about this when we talked about ancient Israel. Let's talk about another one. How about this one? Muhammad. Muhammad, also in a land where it taught polytheism, he stood out as teaching about one God. And also being guided by this God to do certain things. Same thing with Abraham. They had certain missions that they had. Interesting enough, wouldn't it be, that it was Abraham that came out of Babylon, or the Mesopotamia, nearing Persia, but came out of Mesopotamia, and then he had two children. He had Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac was the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Ishmael was the father, the great grandfather, hundreds of years later, like 2,000 years later, 1,600, 1,800 years later, being of Muhammad. So very interesting how that all just happens. That monotheism basically came out of the Middle East, or came out of the Near East. It's just very fascinating to me, at least. There are some other monotheistic. There's actually groups in, or time periods in ancient Mesoamerica that also believed in a monotheistic God. But again, if you want to learn about that, you can go back to our first season, or our first book, curriculum, the first month that we started doing this. Okay, but let's go back to Zoroastrianism. So he basically taught that there was one God, that it was monotheistic. So Darius actually embraced Zoroastrianism, and he declared Ahura Mazda as the supreme deity in his inscriptions and royal proclamations. So Darius was the ultimate leader of the empire. He was the emperor of all of Persia and the largest swath of land, or the empire, at his time. One of the most famous examples is the Bohistun inscription, where Darius actually credits Ahura Mazda for his victory over rebels and his legitimacy of Darius's rule. So that's a really interesting part. But by making Zoroastrianism a state religion, again, not until 522 or around that time, Darius actually unified the vast empire that was Persia under a common spiritual and moral framework. Now, what's interesting is, remember, the Jews were taken out of Babylon and were allowed to go over wherever they wanted in all of Persia. Now, this is near the beginning of, Cyrus the Great's rule. Now, the Jews were one of the only ones besides Zoroastrianism that actually believed in a single God. Not Babylon, the Persians. So they were actually allowed to go into Persia. Now, in this time that they actually went into Persia, the Jews, they were actually allowed to have a lot of influence in the empire of Persia as well. So they actually had a lot of the rulers go over to Persia and serve in the courts of their leaders. This is all very interesting information of how it all worked together. So even though Zoroastrianism was dominant, Darius allowed freedom of religion. He was just like Cyrus the Great and Cambyses. Now, he knew that that would actually bring people together. His part of the diplomacy. So religious tolerance was one of the biggest things that he wanted to stress in his world. Even though he said it was a state religion, he wanted everyone else to be able to believe the way they believed. Very different than when, what happened in Great Britain, when the king basically demanded, we're doing the Anglican Church, or Catholicism took over Spain, or such. They didn't like when other beliefs came in. Zoroastrianism actually thrived off of it. They wanted people to have the freedom to choose. So this kept the empire stable, even though they were so diverse, because they actually allowed people to believe the way that they wanted to, and they promoted the belief of the Zoroastrianism. At the same time, I would not want a government to come in and say, you're going to believe this in the United States. I'm like, no, you're not. So the freedom of religion allowed them not to divide by saying this is a state controlled, not state controlled, dominant religion in this empire. What else did it do? How about dualism? Zoroastrianism emphasized a battle between good and evil, with Ahur Mazad representing the truth and his enemy, Angra Mainyu, also known as Ahuriman, which represented basically chaos. You had good and evil. What other things? How about the ethical rule? So again, you created this empire, you want to be able to teach people about ethics. And so Darius encouraged basically his governors to rule justly and align with Zoroastrianism and their values of honesty and righteousness. So this actually helped him guide his whole civilization, Zoroastrianism, and the monotheistic belief that he had. Now, what else did he do? So Darius wasn't just a military leader. I keep telling you this, but I want to pound it in. He was also a patron of the arts. That's right. He liked the arts, he liked architecture, and he liked engineering. This is why so many great buildings were actually built during his time. So under his rule, Persia became one of the most advanced and artistically rich civilizations in the ancient world. The jewel of the empire. Let's talk about this. This was called Persepolis. Now, Darius built Persepolis as the grand capital of Persia. It was a symbol of the empire's power and culture. So you have Persia, Persepolis. The opolis is basically a center of cultural and academic learning from all different views. That's what the polis basically points to. So the Persian capital, the Persian center of culture and understanding. That was what the name is based off of. It also featured a massive palace with columns all over the place. So you think about Greece having the columns, they also had columns in Persia. These actually had intricate carvings on them. So they weren't just like lines going down around the columns. These were designs all over these columns, which were representatives for all over the kingdom, the empire, came and brought gifts to the king, which this actually brought in a lot of the influence throughout the known world. This is Persepolis. So one of the most impressive structures was called the Apadana, which is the audience hall. And this is again where the king would entertain people from around the empire to come and bring gifts for the king. You can also remember this. King Solomon had very, very much the same thing. So how about his engineering? So that is the jewel of the empire. That's Persepolis. Now you have his engineering structures. Okay. So some of the first things to talk about. We've already talked about Darius's desire, his drive to build a trade route. So from Sardis Sardis is the one that's in around where the Elamites were. Again, let me show you this map. Okay, the Elamites were in this area of Iran. Sardis is about right here. Up to Susa, which is up here, nearing the Greek provinces. So he had this trade route, and he did actually trade with the Greeks before he tried to conquer them. Okay, let's see. Other engineering feats. We talked about this last week, he had a canal down here. Now when he took over, when Cambyses took over Egypt, he made this all under Persian rule. Well, over here you actually had a canal from the Nile over here into the Black Sea to be able to send transports down here, ships up down south, and also up north to get goods into the Mediterranean, which would come closer to him, and also down to the Black Sea, which would be good for trade. These are all great things. And the other thing we mentioned last week, or sorry, on Tuesday, was the coin system. This was called the Darkus. The Darkus was gold, the Derrick was gold. The silver was siglos. So the siglos, silver, Derrick, gold. But it was based on all the trade in the Persian Empire was set on a standard economy. So everyone could actually trade equally to some extent, to the most extent they could. I mean, you can't actually control everyone and how they're going to trade, but there were actually governors over these areas who would actually hear if people were being mistreated and such. Okay. What else did this create? Now, Darius passed away, and he left a legacy, not just of the arts, not just of religion, like we were talking about, but also a challenge. Now, Darius failed the first time he tried to go into Athens. He lost 6,000 men to 129, or to the Greeks, the Athenians, losing 129 people. Now, this left a challenge to Darius' son. So, Darius' son was by the name of Xerxes the First. Xerxes assembled one of the largest armies in the ancient world. Now, 200,000 soldiers. Remember, Darius did not come with anywhere near that amount. But Xerxes, he basically took that challenge that his dad gave and he says, I'm going to give everything to it. So he enlisted everyone in the empire, not just in Persia, in the entire empire. Anyone that they could trust to become part of the army, he inscribed them, he taught them, trained them. If you want to say brainwashed them, sure, why not? And they marched over here into the miners, into the just below Turkey, where they caught ships and sailed over into Athens. Now, that is quite the feat. 200 soldiers on who knows how many ships. So, in this part, he marched through Asia Minor, actually. Sorry, it wasn't all by ship. He marched through Asia Minor, crossing into Greece via Thrace, which is where his father came through. So 200,000 soldiers marching, and most likely, though I don't actually know where they marched, doesn't actually say, I'm pretty sure they used his own trade route, the Royal Road, to be able to march through Asia Minor and come up into Greece with the hopes, there you go, with the hopes to come down into Athens. Okay, so let's talk about this. So he crossed Greece via what was called the Hellespont and on bridges of boats. So he actually put boats out. I wish I actually knew where some of this stuff was. Okay, let's go for this. Hellespont. See if there's anything in there. No, that's what it says, but that's not. So, he came through Thrace. I don't know exactly where he put the actual boats, the bridge of boats. But he was known for that. That was one of the big things when attacking Athens. The Persian army was thought to be unstoppable. Unstoppable. Now, this is until they came to this country. And because I'm not going to try to find it on my own, this is Thermopylae. So I'm going to zoom out first. There's Thermopylae, and there's Athens. So he had to get around this area, which had high terrain, high mountains all around it, which funneled everyone into one spot. This is where the Spartans came to stop him. So there was this bottleneck right here with the Spartans. 300 Spartans. 300 Spartans, and actually there was a little bit more. So it was led by King Leonidas. He had a force of 300 Spartans, and what they don't tell you is that he also had 700 Greek allies who took a stand during the narrow neck. Now, at the same time that they had the allies with them, the 300 were the ones that stayed in front. For 3 days, the Greeks held off the Persian army. Remember, there's 200,000 soldiers, or at least however many survived the march, because that was a freaking long march. But they used this narrow neck of terrain in order to keep the Persians from coming into Greece and into Athens and taking over Athens. However, the Greek trader named Aphialtes led by the Persians to a secret path, allowing them to surround the Spartans. This is how the 300 finally were taken. And those 300 died. But rather than retreat, Leonidas and his 300 Spartans fought to the death to stop them. Even though they were encircled, they were surrounded by, thanks to this traitor, Aphialtes, they stood for 3 days and fought for 3 days, not allowing the Persians to get around them, to finally get through to Athens. Now, here's an interesting thing. How many of the Persians died during that time? I did not look that up. I'm going to let you look that up. So this is basically the symbol of heroic resistance in all world history. This is like the biggest symbol for heroic resistance. We'll just call it that way. I'm trying to think of another word of saying it, but it's the easiest way of putting it. Through this battle, though, Persians were able to have a victory. It gave the Greeks time, though, to regroup and prepare for the later battle of Salamis and Plataea. So Xerxes would eventually burn Athens. He got to Athens, move back a little bit further. He comes down to Athens and burns it. But his navy suffered a crushing defeat when they finally get up there. So let's see. Salamis, Greece. It's right here. This is the Greek island, Salamis. And the Persian navy had a crushing defeat in the Battle of Salamis, which actually was a turning point for the war. So, in the end, yes, Athens was destroyed. But was Greece taken over? Not really. Because they had so many other people that were there to defend them. Here's my action item for you, though. Because I didn't look up what the actual numbers were, I'd like to see if you could find the actual numbers of, one, how many did that 300 Spartans take down of the Persians? How many of the Persians were taken out by the 300 Spartans 3 days of battle before the Spartans basically finally lost? Then I want you to look at what happened to Xerxes and the 200,000 soldiers after Salamis. I want you to find that out. That is your action item for today. I want you to go and look that up. There's one other thing I want you to think about as part of that, because I already created one before I came to this point. Here's one more question. What do you think was the most significant battle in the Persian War? Was it Thermopylae? Was it Salamis? Was it, you come up with it, Plataea? Find out. Do a little bit of research. Let's recap. Okay. Let's go over the legacy, and then we'll go do a recap. So Darius and Xerxes left behind an empire that was powerful, sophisticated, influential, compared to the Athenians, not as strong per person. They were strong by numbers, not by person. Darius built a vast empire through administration, law, and religion. We talked about that last week. Xerxes led the Persians to the greatest military challenge, but ultimately failed to conquer Greece. There you go, I just told you. But, I mean, still look it up. The Battle of Thermopylae became a symbol of bravery and resistance. And also, one more point that you should know, the Persian influence on Greeks, Romans, and even later Islamic cultures shaped the world history to today. It's still being felt today. Okay, now let's go over what we talked about very quick. So Darius Darius the Great built a Persian empire, and Xerxes took the war that Darius started into Greece. Their rule defined the Persian Golden Age. This was the Golden Age of Persia. And yet they still lost both times, Darius and Xerxes. But it also set the stage for future conflicts that would reshape the ancient world. We learned about Zoroastrianism, which was a monotheistic religion, which was one of the only monotheistic religions at the time in the Near East. So that's very interesting. Zoroaster had a very upward battle, trying to promote one God instead of a God for everything. What else did we talk about? We talked about the arts. Darius was a patron of the arts. When it comes to sculptures, when it came to, I don't know about theater, because theater was more popularized by the Greeks, but the architecture. He was all about the architecture, the drawings, the inscriptions, all those things. That was Darius. So if you ever go to Iran and you see great ruins with great designs on them, that most likely came from the Darius time period. Darius, his son Xerxes, even going back to Cyrus and such. That was the whole Golden Age. So, until next time, when we talk more about the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, that will be a great end to the Greek era. So next week, we are done. Sorry, not the Greek, the Persian. Next week, we are done with the Persian Empire. We're going to be moving on to Greece. So stay tuned. Keep listening. Love to see you next week. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the comments below or send me an email. historicalconquest@gmail.com. Can't wait to hear from you. Thank you so much. Have a great day and keep fighting. Take care. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow actually. Take care. Bye.